"Your house looks nice," she said, stepping inside and shaking the snow off her boots. "But your neighbor's house creeps me out. That guy has a blow-up Santa that looks like it's actually staring at me." "That's just old Mr. Doyle," I explained. "He drinks a lot and forgets to plug the Santa in all the way." "Well, he needs to fix that thing," she muttered, hanging up her coat. "I swear I saw it move." We made ourselves comfortable in the living room, which was the only finished room in the house. A big fake tree glowed in the corner, decorated with my grandparents' old ornaments. The rest of the house was still messy. The hallway needed paint, the bathroom tiles were cracked, and the door to the crawl space in the hallway never stayed completely shut unless you played with it. Grandpa always said the crawl space was safe, just for storage, dust, spiders, and old boxes. But when I was a kid, I hated that door and always ran past it at night. It's funny how old childhood fears come back when you're an adult. We sat on the couch watching Home Alone, eating chocolate-dipped pretzels. Leia put her feet up on my lap, and everything felt easy, known, and comfortable. Halfway through the movie, she said, "We should get some wine. We have beer, but it's Christmas. Beer feels wrong." "You're right, wine it is." That meant I had to walk the 2 blocks down to Ridgeview Liquor. "I'll go," I told her, grabbing my coat. "Want anything else?" "Surprise me," she said, smiling. I kissed her on the forehead and stepped out into the cold night. Ridgeview Liquor had been there since the 1980s. A small bell hangs over the door, and it rings twice when someone pushes the door open. The liquor store always smelled like old cardboard and peppermint, and the aisles were very crowded. Jerry, the owner, was behind the counter as always. He was one of those 50-year-old guys who always wanted to talk about sports, no matter the time. "Well, look who it is," he said when I walked in. "You doing all right?" "A little late to be out. Just grabbing some wine," I said. "My girlfriend wanted it." "Ah, women," he said, shaking his head. "They always want wine at Christmas." I grabbed 2 bottles and went to pay. While he put them in a bag, he kept talking about the football game like it was the most important thing on earth. I pretended to listen, nodding when I should. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Leia calling. "1 second, Jerry," I said, stepping away from the counter. "Sure thing, kid," I answered. "Hey, babe, what's wrong?" Her voice was shaky. Can you just stay on the phone for a minute?" "What happened?" She let out a sharp breath. "I keep hearing something." "Hearing what?" She dropped her voice to a whisper. "Something under the floor. The crawl space." I frowned. "It's probably just the house settling, honey." "No, it sounds like something dragging or shuffling. I don't know. I just feel wrong." Leia never got scared easily. She was usually the calm one. "Stay right on the phone," I said softly. "I'm leaving the store now. I'll be home in 5 minutes." "Okay." I could hear her quick, nervous breathing. I paid, quickly said goodbye to Jerry, and walked out into the cold night. Ashbury Lane was quiet. Most houses were dark except for the light from Christmas decorations. Snow crunched loudly under my boots. Leia kept breathing into the phone, trying not to panic. "Do you hear anything right now?" I asked. She paused. "Just strange noises. Maybe I'm just imagining things. I just hate that the crawl space door is right here. I'll check it as soon as I get back," I promised. Another pause. "Could an animal get in?" she asked softly. "No," I said. "There are no openings outside. Grandpa sealed everything up." But even as I said it, I got a nervous, twisted feeling in my gut. I hurried faster. When I turned onto my street, Leia said, Okay, I'm going to try not to think about it. Tell me when you're at the door." "I can see the porch. Almost there." I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and found her sitting stiffly on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes were wide. "Oh my God, thank you," she said, running to me and hugging me tightly. "I think I just scared myself." "You're fine," I said, kissing her cheek. "I'm here now." But her hands were still shaking. We poured the wine and put on the Grinch. The tension slowly started to go away. She laughed again and leaned against me again. Everything felt normal until the sound came back. A deep thud from under the floor. It wasn't the small pop of an old house settling. It wasn't the crack of wood changing. It was a dull, heavy, deliberate thud. I froze solid. Leia looked at me, her eyes filling with terror. "You heard that, didn't you?" she whispered. My throat went dry. Yes. Another thud hit, followed by a faint scraping sound. My heart was pounding. "Okay," I said, standing up. "Maybe there really is something down there." "Don't go down there," she begged, grabbing my arm. "I just want to take a fast look." I grabbed the flashlight from the closet in the hall and pulled open the small wooden crawl space door. A blast of cold air rushed up from the dark hole. The smell hit me immediately. Old, damp, and sharp like strong chemicals. "What the heck?" I mumbled. "Please don't go," Leia repeated, her voice shaking. "I'll be quick." I climbed down the few wooden steps, the air getting colder with every step. My flashlight beam cut through the dust. Boxes lined the walls. My grandfather's old things, decorations, tools. I shone the light to the left. Nothing. I shone it to the right. That's when I noticed something that made my chest jump. A bunched-up blanket was lying on the dirt floor in the corner, behind some boxes. It wasn't ours. Then movement. Something shifted behind the tall stack of storage bins. I instantly stumbled backward toward the steps. Nope. No way. I scrambled up quickly, slammed the crawl space door shut, and twisted the lock. "What did you see?" Leia asked, shaking. "Nothing. Probably just an animal. My dad can deal with it tomorrow." But she knew I was lying. We went back to the living room and tried to act normal. But both of us kept looking toward the hallway. We finished the movie, drank our wine, and went to my room to sleep. We left the TV on for a comforting glow in the dark. I finally fell asleep around 1:30 a.m. I woke up hours later with a splitting headache and needed to use the bathroom badly. The TV was still on. Leia was asleep next to me, curled under the blanket. The hallway was completely dark. I quietly opened the bedroom door. That's when I saw it. A tall, black shape at the far end of the hallway, standing still and facing me. My entire body locked up. My first thought wasn't to scream. It was to slowly, silently close the door, which I did. I twisted the lock. My hands were shaking violently. Behind me, Leia stirred. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Someone is in the house." She was instantly wide awake. "What?" The doorknob started turning, slow, harsh, and clearly on purpose. Then a man's voice, deep, broken, and rough, said through the door, "Hey!" Leia gasped and slammed her hand over her mouth. My heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The doorknob rattled harder, and then we heard footsteps walking away. I grabbed my phone and quickly dialed 911 with shaking fingers. The operator tried to keep me calm. "Stay right there. Officers are on the way. Don't open the door." Leia cried silently next to me, holding my arm tight. Every small sound in the house was suddenly loud. The heater humming, a faint ringing in my ear, the distant creak of old floorboards. It felt like forever, but finally, police sirens echoed outside. Blue and red lights flashed across the windows. We opened the door only when an officer shouted, "Police! Come out!" They searched the whole house, but of course he was gone. He had come out of the crawl space and gone out the back door, leaving it slightly open. But the worst part was what the officers found that I hadn't seen earlier. A dirty sleeping bag, a pile of food wrappers, empty water bottles, and a dark, bad-smelling puddle in the corner. He had been living down there for days, maybe even weeks. The officer looked at me with a serious, grim expression and said he wasn't just passing through. He was staying, watching, and listening. It made me feel sick. Leia grabbed my arm so hard her fingernails dug in. We spent the night at her apartment. My parents didn't believe the story until they saw the official police report. I never stayed in that house alone again. And even now, years later, I still wake up sometimes, sure that I hear someone moving under the floor. I never expected to spend the week before Christmas wearing a cheap red suit, sweating under bright mall lights while strangers threw their crying kids onto my lap. But that's exactly where my life was that winter. I was 24, completely broke, and desperate to fix things after a very hard year. I had moved from Kansas City to a tiny town in Colorado called Pinebrook. It was a boring valley town with just a big store, a bowling alley with old carpet, and the Evergreen Mall. The mall tried so hard to look festive every December that it somehow made the holiday feel even more depressing. I took the seasonal Santa job because I needed money badly to keep my terrible one-bedroom apartment. Rent had already used up 2 of my paychecks, and I was behind on the electric bill. When the mall's Christmas boss, Miss Hargrove, asked if I would work as a cashier at the Santa photo booth, I said yes right away. Most days my job was just handing out small printed photos and pretending to enjoy the same Christmas songs playing over and over. It wasn't exciting, but it was easy enough until everything fell apart. There were only 3 regular workers: Brett, who played Santa, Tina, the photographer, and me, the cashier. And there was one customer who always caught my eye. A woman named Laurel, maybe 35, with a kind smile, who wore a nice navy coat with a fake fur hood. She wasn't being flirty or strange, just genuinely nice. She was the kind of person who would ask about your day and actually care about the answer. On the days she brought her 2 children, I always felt a little less miserable. I didn't exactly have a crush on her, but I appreciated being treated like a human being. Brett, the guy playing Santa, was another story. He was older, maybe in his mid-40s, with laugh lines so deep you could lose a coin in them. He had this crazy amount of energy, like he drank 3 energy drinks before every shift. Kids loved him. Parents loved him. The mall managers loved him. Honestly, he was too good at being Santa. Too loud, too energetic, too excited. I just figured he was weird. But I found out later there was much more to him. A lot more. The week that changed everything, 3 days before Christmas, the place was completely packed. Since Pinebrook was usually a boring town, getting a picture with Santa was a huge deal. Around 4 p.m., during one of the busiest times, I watched Brett leap out of the Santa chair and loudly announce, "Break time! Santa needs to refill his belly." The parents chuckled, and the kids cheered. Tina, the photographer, rolled her eyes, and Brett ran toward the employee hall. His red coat flapping, bells ringing, and his beard slightly crooked. 10 minutes went by, then 15, then 20, Tina muttered. He better not be throwing up in the bathroom again. But he didn't come back. After 30 minutes, Miss Hargrove, the mall boss, rushed down and hissed, "Where in the world is he? We have a 2-hour line waiting." I shrugged. He said he was taking a break. "Well, we don't have time for his silly breaks today," she snapped. She pointed her finger right at me. "You, put on the suit." I stared at her. "Ma'am, I'm only 24. She glared. "Congratulations. Tonight you are also Santa." I tried every excuse I could think of. "I'm too young. I don't know what to say to kids. These boots won't fit my feet." Miss Hargrove stopped all my excuses with one sharp sentence. "You either put on the suit, or you lose your job." Since I needed that money more than I cared about looking silly, I put on the suit. I became Santa badly. Wearing the Santa costume felt like wrapping myself in a wet wool blanket that smelled like cheap perfume. The fake beard felt as itchy as fiberglass. The hat kept sliding sideways. The huge boots pinched my big toe so hard I thought it would bruise. The parents noticed right away that I wasn't the usual Santa. I heard whispers, "That's not the same guy. He looks younger. Why is he so nervous?" I was nervous because I didn't know how to talk like Santa. I didn't know how to hold the kids without worrying I would drop them. I kept saying awkward things like, what's up? I mean, ho ho ho." Tina kept giving me angry looks, but I kept going for hours. And then I saw him. It was around 7 in the evening when I noticed a man sitting alone at a food court table, facing right toward our booth. He wasn't eating. He wasn't on his phone. He didn't have any shopping bags. He was just staring straight at me. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone. Lots of people sit around the mall. But this guy's stare was not casual or bored. It was cold, direct, and he didn't blink. He looked about 45. He wore a leather jacket, a black knit hat, and his skin looked rough, like he spent his life outside. He had a scar running from the corner of his mouth down to his jaw. When our eyes met, he didn't look away. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his arms on the table, like he was getting ready to watch a show. A sudden shiver went down my back. I whispered to Tina, "Hey, do you see that man over there?" She glanced over. "Which guy?" "That one. Black hat. Food court." She squinted, then shrugged. "Nope. Looks like a regular dad to me. But a regular dad doesn't stare at strangers like that." I tried to ignore it, but the staring never stopped. 20 minutes later, he was still there, sitting exactly the same way, like a statue. Every time I looked up, he was in the exact same spot. Then he stood up and walked a few steps closer. Not much, but enough that I felt the space between us shrinking. My stomach started to feel tight. I tried to tell myself he wasn't watching me. Maybe he was looking at the camera setup. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. My break finally came, and it was the worst idea I ever had. I practically tore the beard off just to get some air. I looked toward the food court. The man had moved. He wasn't at the table anymore. He was standing halfway across the walkway now, still staring, still getting closer. I pretended not to see him and quickly walked toward the employee hallway. I could hear my own heart beating loudly in my ears. I turned the corner into the employee hallway and heard the echo of footsteps right behind me. They were following me. I started walking faster. The footsteps sped up too. I mumbled under my breath, "Oh no, oh no." The nearest door was the men's restroom on the left. Without thinking, I slipped inside and ducked into the last stall, my big Santa boots scraping the floor. I was shaking so badly I didn't lock the door right away, but I forced my hand down and twisted the latch. Less than 2 seconds later, the restroom door burst open. Heavy, angry footsteps stomped inside quickly. I slapped my hand over my mouth. My heart was slamming so hard I felt dizzy. The man muttered in a rough, scraping voice, "Where are you? I saw you come in here." I looked down at my bright black Santa boots sticking out clearly under the stall door. I was an idiot. I might as well have left a trail of gingerbread men pointing to me. The man's boots stopped right in front of my stall. I squeezed my eyes shut, and then bam! He kicked the door open so hard it hit the wall next to me. I stumbled backward, nearly falling over the long Santa coat dragging at my feet. He grabbed me by the collar and yanked me forward so quickly that the back of my head hit the hand dryer. "You think you can hide from me?" he sneered. His breath smelled strongly of cigarettes and cheap alcohol. His eyes were red and wild. I don't know you," I choked out. "The hell you don't," he snapped. "Where is my money?" Money? What money? Please, I think you have the wrong." He ripped the Santa hat off my head, then the fake white wig, and then the beard. The hatred in his eyes changed to confusion, and then something like panic. His grip loosened slightly. "Ah, hell," he muttered, stepping back. "You ain't him." My voice shook badly. "I told you. I don't know who you think I am." "Shut up," he hissed, pacing back and forth. "Darn it. If you ain't him, then where the heck is he? He's not at the booth. He's not answering his phone." He pulled out an old flip phone. Seriously, a flip phone, and called someone. "Yeah," he growled into the phone. "Not him. Wrong guy. No, listen. I'm telling you, this isn't the Santa from before. This one's too young. He's just a kid." My palms were sweating so much I nearly dropped my own phone. He hung up and looked at me again, and to my shock he smiled. 2 of his teeth were missing. "Sorry, buddy," he said. "Wrong Santa." Then he actually winked at me. "Merry Christmas." He walked out of the restroom like nothing at all had happened, like he hadn't just threatened me, pushed me, and scared me half to death. I stayed frozen in that stall for 2 full minutes before I could finally breathe again. My whole body was shaking. My hands felt numb. When I finally made it back to the Santa booth, Tina frowned. "Dude, what happened? You look like you saw a ghost." I forced out a laugh. "Something like that." But inside, I was falling apart. That night, lying in my apartment with the cheap heater rattling loudly, everything finally made sense. The real Santa, Brett, the guy who was always laughing, always excited, always acting strange, he wasn't just weird. He was running from something bad. And that something had come looking for him right there in the mall, during the busiest week of the year, while he was wearing his full costume. And because I had been forced to take his place, I became the target instead. I still have no idea how much money he owed. No idea who those men were. No idea how much danger he was in. Brett never returned to the mall. Not for his paycheck, not for his belongings, not even for his car parked outside. He simply disappeared. Sometimes, when I walk through a mall at Christmas and hear the faint sound of bells jingling, I think about that moment in the stall, that case of mistaken identity that could have easily gotten me killed. And every year since then, no matter where I am, I can't look at a mall Santa the same way. Because one December night, I learned a terrible lesson. There are some people out there who don't care if you've been good or bad. They're just looking for the right Santa. And thank goodness that night I wasn't him. Was 9 years old the winter my family drove out to Maplewood Ridge, a quiet little town in upstate Pennsylvania where my mom's older sister lived. We didn't visit very often, maybe only once every few years, mostly because my Aunt Lorna's house felt strange. I didn't know how to explain the feeling back then. I only knew that whenever we drove onto her long gravel driveway, surrounded by bare, cold trees, something tight and strange would happen in my chest. It wasn't exactly fear, just a feeling that things were wrong. It felt like the house itself remembered bad things that the rest of us had forgotten. But back then, I didn't worry much. It was Christmas Eve. The air smelled like cinnamon, and the whole world looked like a snow globe that someone had shaken too hard. My parents were fighting over the map. My little niece, Arlie, kept kicking my seat, and the radio kept breaking up into static. Honestly, it felt like every other long road trip for the holidays. When we finally reached the house, a dark, old 2-story place built around the 1920s, the first thing I noticed was how silent it was. No wind, no cars, just the crunch of our tires on the snow. A single porch light was blinking weakly, like it was about to die. "Isn't this place something?" my dad joked as he took our bags out. "It looks like the kind of house that tells scary stories about you." Mom playfully hit his arm. "Stop. It's just old, that's all." But even at 9 years old, I knew she didn't believe herself. The full truth only came out years later. We weren't supposed to stay the night. My dad drank too much holiday beer, and my mom hated driving in the snow after dark. So, staying over wasn't a nice, sudden idea. It was the only safe choice. My family almost never stayed overnight anywhere, not even with family. But that night, we made an exception, and I wish we hadn't. Inside, the house felt warmer than I expected. Maybe because Aunt Lorna always kept the fireplace roaring hot. The smell of burning wood and gingerbread cookies hit me instantly. Aunt Lorna's 2 boys, my cousins, weren't there this year. They were with their dad. So it was just me, Turan, Mom, Dad, my niece Arlie, and Aunt Lorna. This made the big old house feel too large and too empty. We ate dinner, laughed, and opened our new Christmas Eve pajamas, just like we always did. It felt normal enough, but even while everyone talked, my eyes kept looking down the hallway that led from the living room to the back rooms. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just out of sight, listening, watching, and waiting. You know how a dog will growl at something a person can't see? That was my brain that night. Around 11:30 p.m., I got very sleepy. I curled up on the couch with a soft Santa blanket, listening to the quiet rumble of the adults talking. I remember thinking, finally, I can relax. I didn't know that the moment I closed my eyes, the house itself would finally open its own secrets. Sometime later, maybe midnight, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, I woke up suddenly, not because of a sound or a touch, but because the air felt heavy and wrong, like the whole house had stopped taking a breath. The moonlight cutting through the window blinds made a bright white line across the floor. My blanket had slid onto the rug, and my neck hurt from sleeping crooked. I lifted my head, rubbed my eyes, and instantly froze. 2 kids were standing in the archway between the living room and the dining room. A boy and a girl. They weren't moving or talking, they were just there. The moonlight made them look pale white, almost glowing. The girl was standing slightly in front of the boy, her head tilted like she was listening to something he wasn't saying aloud. Their hands moved a little, like people having a quiet conversation. But I didn't hear a single sound, not a whisper, not even a breath. It was like the world was muted. I didn't panic right away. At first, I thought they were real kids, maybe my cousins or neighbors' kids who just walked in. The house was old. "Hey!" I whispered. No reaction. So I whispered louder. "Hey! What are you 2 doing up?" Nothing. They didn't even twitch. That's when the terror finally hit me, like a freezing cold hand squeezing my ribs. I reached down and shook my mom's shoulder. "Mom, where are the boys?" She groaned, half asleep. "Honey, the boys aren't here. They're with their dad tonight. You know that. Everyone else is sleeping in the back." My stomach dropped fast, and the floor felt like it was tilting. Then who are they? I looked back at the doorway. The boy and girl had stopped moving their hands, and now they were both staring straight at me, standing straight, heads slightly tilted, eyes unblinking. You know when someone stares at you for too long and the air feels heavier? Multiply that by 1,000. Couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. Something inside me screamed, "Don't speak, don't move, don't let them know you can see them." But it was too late. They already knew. My hands shook as I pulled the blanket to my face and curled into a ball. I must have stayed like that for 20, maybe 30 minutes, counting numbers in my head, trying not to cry, praying they couldn't hear my heart pounding. Finally, when I couldn't take the suspense anymore, I peeked out. They were gone. The doorway was empty. The moonlight was just normal moonlight again. I tried to wake my mom again, but my throat was completely frozen. I must have cried myself to sleep because the next thing I remember was the bright light of morning and the smell of coffee. For years, I told myself it was just a dream. Kids have crazy imaginations, right? That's what I wanted to believe until years later. I was 13 when I finally told my mom, "Hey, remember that Christmas we stayed at Aunt Lorna's? Something weird happened that night." She put down her coffee mug. "What kind of weird?" I told her everything. Every detail, every cold feeling, every second. She didn't laugh or tease me. She didn't say I imagined it. Instead, her face went pale. "Taran," she said softly, "I didn't want to scare you back then, but your aunt was not exactly alone in that house." I held my breath. "What do you mean?" "She used to hear things. Footsteps in the hall when she was the only one home. Pans falling in the kitchen when no one was near. She said she'd feel something sit on the edge of her bed sometimes." I stared at her. Why didn't she ever tell us? She didn't want anyone to think she was crazy. Mom's voice dropped even lower. But she always said whatever was in that house felt young. My skin suddenly felt crawly. Young? Like 2 children? Mom kept talking, like she had been waiting years to finally tell the truth. She said she'd see shadows, 2 figures sometimes, small, child-sized, always standing in the hall. Just standing. My mouth went completely dry. Exactly like the kids I saw? She swallowed hard. Exactly like that. I didn't sleep properly for weeks after that. But the worst part came later when my curiosity finally made me search for the house in the public records. It was built in 1928, and was once owned by a family who lost 2 young children in a fire. They died in the house in the hallway right outside the living room, exactly where I saw the figure standing. We only stayed at that house one more time after that. I slept squeezed in between my parents that night. I remember waking up crying because I had dreamed of a woman, pale and naked, covered in blood, walking through the kitchen as if she was searching for someone she had lost long ago. Maybe it was just a nightmare. Maybe not. I never slept there again. Aunt Lorna finally sold the house. We needed something brighter, she said, but the look in her eyes told a different story. Something restless and young had been waiting in that house. And that night, I think I woke them up. Or maybe, just maybe, they woke me up. I was 8 years old the winter everything changed. I was old enough to stay awake late because I was excited, but still young enough to believe that Santa might actually land his sleigh somewhere on our street in Midtown Pines, Oregon. Back then, Christmas lights felt magical, adults felt completely safe, and monsters were only things that lived under your bed. I didn't know that sometimes they lived in the house across the street. We had just moved into Birchwood Court a few months earlier. Mom always said the place felt cozy enough, but Dad called it a cheap starter house with thin walls and weaker insulation than a cardboard box. Our neighbors were mostly older people who stuck plastic candy canes in their front lawns, except for one couple, the Holbrooks. That was their name, but I only heard it once when Dad checked our mail and mumbled, "Wrong mail again. The Holbrooks are across the way." After that, they were just known as the couple across the street. I had seen them maybe twice. A tall, big man with a very stiff way of walking, and a woman with black hair always pulled back in a low bun. Mom once whispered to Dad, "They seem quiet." Dad replied, "Yeah, the kind of people who probably don't talk much unless they have to." So I never thought about them. Not until Christmas Eve. Our Christmas Eve traditions were simple. Mom made hot chocolate with way too many marshmallows. Dad complained about the electric bill every time he plugged in the lights, and I sat by my bedroom window, pretending I was only looking at the snow, even though everyone knew I was waiting for Santa. This time, though, I was seriously watching. I had my forehead pressed against the cold glass, looking at the rooftops, whispering under my breath, "Come on, Santa, just one time. Let me see the sleigh." I had never really looked at the Holbrooks' house before, but that night, the light in their upstairs window was glowing from the flicker of a TV. Their curtains were open just a little, so I could see a shape on the bed, someone curled up under a heavy blanket. I wasn't trying to spy. When you're that age, the world is too big for curiosity to feel like a crime. I just kept looking back and forth between the dark sky and that glowing window, half expecting Santa to fly right past it. I didn't know that light would be stuck in my mind forever. It was about 11:40 p.m. I know because I kept checking the clock on my nightstand, worried I might fall asleep before the big moment. The room across the street was calm, the TV's soft light shining on the bed. Then I saw movement. At first, it was just a shadow crossing the screen. But then, a tall figure walked into the room. I recognized the man from the driveway. He walked toward the bed, his body stiff and tight. I whispered to myself, "Is he waking her up for Christmas?" But he didn't gently shake her shoulder. He didn't nudge her or whisper. The first downward motion was so fast it didn't even make sense right away. In the dim light, it looked like repeated, hard, furious hitting. His arm moved up and down quickly, like he was smashing something into the bed. The blanket jumped in a scary way. I froze. I didn't know what murder looked like. I was 8. Violence was for cartoons and scraped knees. So for a split second, I tried to tell myself it was something else. But the way his body moved, tight, angry, silent, made my stomach twist sickeningly. I whispered, "Mom!" But I couldn't pull my eyes away from the window. Another hit. Another. Another. The TV light flashed across the room, like lightning. It lit up the man's face for half a second. His expression was blank, focused, like he was just doing some boring chore. The blanket stopped moving. I didn't scream or cry. I just backed away from the window so fast that my heel hit my toy train and I almost fell down. Then I ran. I flew down the stairs, missing the last few steps, and crashed onto the living room rug. Mom jumped up from the couch. "Baby, what happened? Are you okay?" I was shaking so hard my words kept getting stuck. I saw. I think the guy across the street is hurting his wife. He's hitting her really badly, Mom. Dad, please. Dad slowly put down his mug of eggnog. Slow down. What do you mean, hurting her? I pointed upstairs. In their window, I saw him. He was hitting her, like, really hard, over and over. Mom put a hand to her chest. Oh my God. Dad tried to stay calm. All right, buddy. Look at me. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand what you saw? I wasn't dreaming. I was watching for Santa. I saw it. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those worried, silent adult looks, the kind that meant they were about to argue. Mom whispered, "Call the police." Dad whispered back, "We don't know what he saw." Mom stepped forward. "Are you listening to him? He's terrified. Just call." Dad knelt down in front of me. "Look, pal, if we call the police about something like this, and it turns out not to be true, we could be in serious trouble. Do you understand?" I nodded through my tears. "But I didn't make it up, Dad. I swear." That was when Mom finally snapped, "Call the police, Jeff. Right now. Or I'm taking him to my sister's house until after Christmas. I won't live across from a man who beats his wife." That ended the argument. Dad grabbed the phone. As he dialed, Mom pulled me close and pressed my head against her stomach, holding the back of my head. "You did the right thing," she whispered. Dad spoke in a low voice. "Yes, hi. I need to report something suspicious at my neighbor's house. No, I want to stay anonymous." Mom and Dad watched from their bedroom window when the police cars arrived. I sat on the edge of their bed, hugging a pillow. Dad whispered, "If she answers the door, this whole thing was just a mistake." But she didn't answer. The police knocked again, much harder. Then one of them shone a flashlight into the living room window. The officer stepped back and spoke quickly into his radio. A minute later, we heard a loud shout. "Sir, come out with your hands up." The sound hit our house like thunder. Mom grabbed my arm. "Sweetheart, put your shoes on now." "Why?" "Because the police are clearing the street, just in case." Dad muttered, "My God, this is turning into a huge problem." Minutes later, an officer knocked on our door, shouting, "Everyone outside! We're clearing the block." I remember the flashing lights, the crunch of snow under my boots, and my mom's hand squeezing mine so tightly that my fingers felt numb. We drove away from our home with a line of red and blue police lights behind us. Dad kept looking in the rearview mirror, whispering, "Please let this be nothing. Please let this be nothing." We didn't come home until early morning. The neighborhood looked like a war zone. Yellow tape everywhere, squad cars, and fresh snow marked only by the boots of the police and medics. The Holbrook's house was dark. No movement, no sirens, just silence. Dad spoke with an officer while Mom kept me inside the car. When he returned, his face was pale. Mom whispered, "What happened?" Dad paused before speaking. He killed her, stabbed her many times. Then he shot himself when the police broke down the door. I just stared at my lap. Mom whispered, "Oh my God." Dad added quietly, "The boy saw more than he should have." Mom pulled me close to her. "Sweetheart, don't listen to this, okay?" But I had already heard enough. Stabbed, not hit, not fought, stabbed more than 30 times. The man I watched wasn't punching. His arm was rising and falling because he was pushing a knife into his wife's body again and again while the TV light flickered like cheap holiday lights. Everything I had seen snapped into horrifying focus. I whispered. She didn't move after that. Mom's eyes instantly filled with tears. "Baby, don't think about it, okay?" Dad placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll get him help. We'll get us all help." But I didn't speak another word during that car ride, or the next day, or for a week after. People think fear is loud, that it makes you scream or cry or shout. But my fear was quiet. It settled into me like freezing water. Slowly, creepily, impossible to shake off. I stopped sleeping with the lights off. I stopped trusting smiles. I stopped looking out windows because I kept thinking, if he could do that to someone he loved, what could anyone else do? Every adult's face looked suspicious. Every conversation sounded like a lie. I watched people closely like a small detective, checking their eyes, their tone, the way they shut doors or how loud they spoke. I didn't feel like a kid anymore, and every Christmas after that had shadows in it. The soft glow of the lights reminded me of that TV flickering. The silence of the winter nights reminded me of the moments before the police shouted. The snow on the rooftops reminded me of how I'd been waiting for Santa. But what I found instead was proof that monsters don't need sharp claws or teeth. Sometimes they just need a locked room and a curtain pulled shut. I'm older now, old enough that the memory should have disappeared. But it hasn't. Because sometimes on quiet December nights when the world is still and the lights from the houses across the street flicker against my window, I swear I see that room again. The unmoving blanket, the TV glowing, the man's shadow. My childhood ended in a matter of seconds, and I've spent years trying to get back the feeling that the world is safe, that people aren't hiding terrible things behind thin walls and closed blinds. But some wounds don't fully heal. They just become quieter. That Christmas Eve taught me a lesson no kid should ever have to learn. You never truly know who your neighbors are. And sometimes the worst monsters live the closest. I don't talk much about the Christmas when everything changed. Mostly because for years, I didn't even understand what had really happened. My parents kept the truth hidden tighter than any gift under the tree. But I guess that's what parents do. They patch up the holes in the world so their children don't fall through. Back then, I was 13, old enough to know Santa wasn't real, but young enough to still wish he was. We lived on the west side of a small town in the Midwest. It was the kind of place where winters were terribly cold and people minded their own business a little too much. The neighborhood was rough in some areas. Loud fights, broken streetlights, and smokers outside at all hours. But it was home. Our house was an old, tired rental with thin walls, a freezing basement, and a furnace that clanged loudly like it had unfinished business. Every Christmas Eve, my siblings and I slept downstairs so our parents could set up all the gifts. We pretended not to know they were the ones putting them out. Still, it was a tradition. And honestly, the basement felt like its own little world on nights like that. My siblings, Liam, Tasha, and little Ruby, were already in their sleeping bags by the time I walked down the creaky steps that year. Mom had wrapped battery-powered fairy lights around the old wooden support beams, giving everything a warm, soft glow. The air smelled like the cinnamon rolls she had baked earlier and the dusty carpet we could never fully clean. "About time, slowpoke," Tasha teased from her sleeping bag. "You take longer to brush your teeth than Grandma takes to finish a story." Yeah, I muttered, throwing a pillow at her. She ducked and giggled. Dad poked his head down the stairwell. "All right, troops," he said. "No going upstairs, no sneaking gifts. And if you hear any weird noises tonight, it's probably just the house settling. Or raccoons." "Dad," Ruby squealed. "No raccoons." He laughed. "Just kidding, kiddo. Go to sleep. Santa's got a busy night." Even though we all knew better by then, Dad still said that every year. Some traditions are hard to let go of. I settled into my spot near the furnace, pulling my blanket up to my chin. We talked for a little while about silly things, mostly arguing over which Christmas movie was the best. I was right, by the way, and guessing what gifts we were getting. Then the noise started. It was quiet at first, a dull thud. Then another, a muffled shout that came from outside through the snow. "Probably just drunk people leaving Calhoun's," I said. The bar down the street was always loud around the holidays. But then came a sharper sound, like something metal hitting the pavement. Tasha sat up. "That didn't sound like drunk people." Liam pulled off his headphones. "What's happening?" Before I could answer, the basement door cracked open. Mom hurried down the stairs, her face pale and her eyes darting around. "Kids," she said, her voice tight, "stay down here. No matter what you hear, you do not come upstairs." "Mom," I asked, "what's going on?" She shook her head. Just listen to me, okay? Stay here." She gave each of us a quick kiss, then hurried back up the stairs, shutting the door tightly behind her. We were quiet, too quiet. Even Ruby stopped fidgeting. More noises came, clearer this time. Tires screeching, men shouting, and a sound that might have been a scream or just the wind twisting down the street. It was hard to tell. "Should we, look?" Liam whispered. "No," I said. Mom said stay, but even I could feel my heart climbing up into my throat. Minutes passed, maybe 10. Maybe only 2. Time felt stretched thin and slow. Then the sound of police sirens cut through the night. Dozens of them, so loud they made the basement windows shake. Red and blue lights flashed through the snow packed against the glass, blinking like broken Christmas lights. Now we were all truly scared, but we tried to pretend we weren't. "Probably just a car accident," I said weakly. "Yeah," Liam agreed, but his voice cracked, showing he didn't believe it either. We moved closer together, needing comfort more than warmth. The sirens went away, replaced by the sound of police radios, heavy boots stomping, and more shouting. Then, after a long, tense wait, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy ones, too heavy to be Mom. The door slowly creaked open, and I swear all 4 of us stopped breathing at the exact same moment. Dad came down the steps first, smiling, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And right behind him was Santa Claus. A full suit, red and fluffy, trimmed with white fur, boots covered in snow, and big sacks thrown over one shoulder. He had a white beard, rosy cheeks, and glasses perched on his nose. Ruby gasped, pure joy lighting up her small face. "No way," Liam whispered. Even I felt a strange flicker of wonder, like my childhood was reaching out to me one last time. "Ho, ho, 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 ho," Santa boomed. "Merry Christmas, little ones." His voice was deep and warm, like a gentle grandfather's. But something about it felt strange. Not scary, just unfamiliar. But I didn't think about it too much. Santa stepped forward, bending low so he wouldn't hit his head on the pipes hanging from the ceiling. "Now, I heard there were some good children down here," he said. "And since my sleigh got stuck in a big snowbank outside," he winked, "I thought I'd come say hello while the police help me out." "Police?" I repeated. "Yep, good people helping old Saint Nick get back to work." He reached into his sack. "But first, I have something for each of you." We gathered around him. The presents were wrapped in plain paper, not fancy like Mom's wrapping. But each one had our names written on it in neat, curly letters. "How?" I started to ask. "Magic," Santa whispered, tapping his nose. We opened the gifts. They were small things but thoughtful. I got a new sketchbook, exactly what I had wanted. Liam got earbuds. Tasha got a necklace. Ruby got a stuffed penguin, which she immediately hugged. We sang Silent Night badly but happily. We talked for a little while. Santa's eyes kept glancing toward the stairs, like he was listening for something, but he would quickly force his smile back whenever we looked at him. After about 15 minutes, he stood up. "Well, little ones, time for me to get back to work. Merry Christmas." He gave each of us a warm, gentle hug and followed Dad upstairs. The door closed. We didn't hear much after that. Just a little talking, the sound of the front door closing, and then silence. Eventually, we fell asleep, still excited from the strange magic of it all. Christmas morning was perfect. Mom and Dad acted like nothing unusual had happened. We opened gifts, drank hot chocolate, and listened to music. The night before felt like a dream, which is probably exactly what they wanted. I didn't learn the truth until almost 15 years later. I had moved out, gotten a job, and started my own life. One night, while visiting home for the holidays, My dad and I were talking over a couple of beers. We were remembering old times, and I brought up the year Santa visited. Dad looked down at his drink. He was quiet, too quiet. "Son," he finally said, "you're old enough now." He told me everything. That night, while we were downstairs, a terrible fight had broken out just 3 houses down the street. It wasn't just a fist fight, it was brutal. Knives, metal pipes, bats, and people screaming. 3 men died before the police even got there. Mom had come downstairs because she didn't want us to hear or see the chaos. Dad had gone outside because he thought someone had tried to get into our yard. And Santa? Santa wasn't an actor from the mall or some random stranger. He was Mr. Alden, the retired electrician who lived 2 blocks away. He was a kind, quiet man who always brought cookies to church events. He had seen the fight from his own porch, seen Mom standing outside, looked panicked, and saw the police cars rushing onto our street. He knew the kids in the neighborhood would be terrified if they saw the violence. So he quickly grabbed an old Santa suit from his attic. He used it for charity events and walked through the snow to our house. He asked my parents if he could help distract us, to give us something good to remember instead of the horror happening outside. Dad said his voice cracked when he thanked the man. Santa kept us busy, happy, and safe while outside people were dying. I just stared at my father as he told me this. My throat felt tight. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I whispered. "Because," Dad said softly, "you kids deserved one Christmas memory that wasn't ruined by the world being cruel." I thought about that for a long time, about the choices people make, big and small, that shape who we become. Later that winter, Mr. Alden passed away due to heart problems. At his funeral, I stood over his casket longer than I should have. Not because I knew him well, but because for one night, when the world outside had become sharp and violent, he walked into our dark basement carrying light. A man who owed us nothing gave us a gift I will never forget. A peaceful Christmas Eve. And every year since, when snow starts piling against the windows, I think about him. About the protecting lies parents tell their children. About the heroes who don't wear capes. Some just borrow Santa suits. And some miracles aren't miracles at all. They are just people choosing to be good when everything outside is dark. I never thought the winter of 2005 would be the reason I still wake up sweating nearly 20 years later. Back then, I was 3 weeks away from turning 50. I was still trying to convince myself I wasn't getting old. Still pretending I could handle every problem in my life with just stubbornness and a gym membership. If you asked the people who knew me, they would say I was the kind of guy who never asked for help. The kind who would bike 15 miles in a snowstorm just to prove he could. And maybe that was true. But nobody ever tells you that pride has a sound. And it sounds a lot like your own heartbeat slowing down in the dark. My name is Ronald Hyde, but everyone calls me Ron unless my wife is angry, in which case she uses all 3 syllables like a judge giving a sentence. That December, our house in Maple Ridge, Wisconsin, was covered in cheap Christmas lights that I had been planning to replace for 5 years. They were the kind that flicker like they're trying to send a message in Morse code. We weren't rich. We weren't exciting. We were just average, almost boringly so. But I liked average. Average felt safe. What I didn't know was that I was only inches away from the scariest moment of my entire life. An experience so close to death that it left something behind. Something I still feel every December. I had finished a long Friday at work, the kind of day where the office heater never quite worked, so everyone pretended they weren't freezing. I jumped onto my old red bicycle. God knows why I never bought a new one, and pedaled to the gym just like I always did. Routine is a very strong habit. By the time I got there, the sky was a gray color, and snowflakes were drifting down like slow-moving ash. I pushed through my usual workout. A few miles on the stationary bike, some lifting, and then a session on the treadmill that made my knees pop like bubble wrap. Nothing was unusual. Nothing warned me that one of my main blood vessels was nearly blocked. As I left, the light snow had turned into a cold, biting rain. The wind was blowing so hard that my eyes started watering. And because I am a stubborn idiot, I pedaled harder. "Old man weather's kicking your butt today, huh?" shouted a teenager waiting at a bus stop. Yeah, well, tell him he owes me dinner first. I yelled back, trying to laugh. By the time I reached home, I was completely soaked, shaking from the cold, and starving. You look like you just crawled out of Lake Michigan, my wife, Kendra, said without turning around as she put on a heavy coat and slipped on earrings in front of the hallway mirror. Thanks, sweetheart. Always good for the self-esteem. I leaned my bike against the wall. Water was dripping everywhere. She grabbed her purse. I'm going to the movies with my sister. Are you good? Yeah. Go have fun, I said, waving her off. I left some leftover chicken in the fridge. Eat something warm. I'm 50, not 5. She gave me a look. Ronald. Fine, I'll eat. She left and the door clicked shut. Silence settled over the house like a heavy coat. I warmed up the chicken and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, just like I always did. Nothing special, nothing dramatic. And then it started. It was very faint at first. A strange, dull ache right under my chest bone. It felt like pressure, not real pain, like someone was pressing a fist gently into my chest. I stopped chewing. Weird. I swallowed the last bit of chicken and waited for the feeling to go away. It felt like heartburn, or maybe I had just eaten too fast. I drank some water, but the pressure slowly spread out, like a warm hand sliding from my chest into my shoulders, then down my left arm. A strange tingling feeling crawled across my fingertips. My brain ignored it at first because that's what we do. We pretend everything is fine until it isn't. Probably just indigestion, I muttered. Then the pressure became sharper. A knife, not a fist. Okay, that's new. My breathing became shallow. I leaned on the kitchen counter for support. My legs started shaking, and a cold, frightening thought wrapped around my spine like ice. Something was very, very wrong. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking. Just a muscle spasm, I whispered to myself. Just old age, it happens all the time. But my entire left arm had gone numb, completely numb, as if someone had unplugged it from my body. My chest squeezed again, much harder, a crushing pressure that stole my breath. I dialed 911. A calm woman answered. 911, what's your emergency? I think something's wrong with my chest. Sir, are you feeling pain? Yes. Is the pain moving anywhere else? My left arm. It's numb. Are you having trouble breathing? Yes. Okay, stay on the line. Help is on the way. Don't hang up. Her voice was steady, like a rope thrown to someone who is drowning. What is your name, sir? Ron. Hi. Heath. Ron, I need you to stay with me. Okay? Keep talking to me. I can try. She kept me calm until I heard the sirens getting closer. Then I remembered I hadn't called Kendra. I fumbled with the phone and managed to hit the call button. She picked up on the third ring. Hey, I'm just getting popcorn. Kendra. My voice broke. Come home. What? Why? What's wrong? I think I'm having a heart attack. No, Ron. No. Her breath caught. I'm on my way. She hung up. The last thing I remember before the emergency workers rushed in was leaning heavily on the sofa. The room was spinning, and the windows looked warped, like melting glass. Then came the sound of running feet, loud voices, gloves snapping on, and equipment clattering. A man's voice was loud and clear. Sir, Ron, look at me. Stay awake, buddy. I tried to focus through the blur. His name tag said Parker. Ron, don't close your eyes, okay? He urged. I'm just tired, I mumbled. No. Look at me. Keep your eyes open. Do you hear me? I tried. God, I tried, but the world grew dim, like a light switch slowly being turned off. I felt myself slipping away, and then there was nothing. I don't remember falling. I don't remember the electric shock. No tunnel, no bright white lights, no angels, and no quick flashes of my childhood memories. I simply woke up, as if I had taken a long, deep nap. Except I wasn't in my living room anymore. I was standing on a road. A silent, empty, snow-covered road. But the snow wasn't real. It was too perfect, and each flake hung in the air as if time had stopped. "Hello," I called out. My breath didn't fog up. My voice didn't echo. I heard something behind me, crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps in the snow. I turned around. The figure stood about 20 feet away. A man, or something shaped like a man, was wearing an old winter coat, its head tilted, watching me. "Hey!" I shouted. "Where am I?" The figure didn't move. I took a step toward it. "Hello, I need help." It slowly, carefully lifted one hand. Its fingers were unsettlingly long, more joints bending than they should have, and the hand curled in a motion that seemed to be beckoning me. That gesture chilled my blood more than the cold air ever could. "Ron!" A voice shouted behind me. I turned around. EMT Parker was kneeling over what looked exactly like my own body. Clear. A bright flash of light exploded, and the quiet, snowy world shattered like a mirror hit by a hammer. I woke up for real in the hospital 3 days later. Turns out I had a massive heart attack on Christmas Eve. Parker and his team had saved me, using the defibrillator twice in my living room. Kendra was by my side, red-eyed and exhausted, holding my hand so tightly it hurt. The doctors explained everything. My family rallied around me and I made a full recovery. I even changed my ways. I retired the old bike, started eating healthier, and finally let go of some of that stubborn pride. But that moment on the snow-covered road, that brief slip into the dark, stayed with me. I never told anyone about the figure with the wrong hands. How could I? I was clinically dead for over a minute. It must have been my brain playing tricks. But every December I feel it, that cold, slow pressure in my chest. And sometimes, when the Christmas lights on the houses outside start to flicker against my window, I hear the soft crunch, crunch, crunch of footsteps coming toward my door. It reminds me that I was called, and I answered, and I wonder if, next time, I'll be able to turn my back on the beckoning hand, or if I'll simply follow the perfect, silent snow. I sucked in air so hard my throat burned. Voices were a loud blur around me. "He's back. He's back. Stay awake, Ron." I blinked at the bright hospital lights. My chest hurt terribly, like a horse had kicked me. "What happened?" "You went into V-fib," the EMT Parker said, his forehead shiny with sweat. "Your heart stopped." I tried to sit up. He gently pushed me back down. "No, no, don't move." My wife's voice screamed from behind the medics. "Ron." I saw her face. Red, terrified, covered in tears. "I'm okay," I croaked. "You are absolutely not okay," she sobbed. They quickly loaded me onto the stretcher. My vision wobbled, and the sirens wailed again. I squeezed my wife's hand, but then a strange whisper brushed past my ear. A voice just beneath the sound of everything else. "Not yet." I jerked my head. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Parker asked. "That someone spoke." "No one spoke, Ron." But I knew what I had heard. And that voice did not belong to anyone alive. At the hospital, things went from terrifying to unreal. They rushed me into the heart unit. Everything smelled like cleaner and fear. Nurses shouted orders. Machines beeped frantic warnings. A doctor yelled, "His artery is 90% blocked. We need to stabilize him before we put in the stent." My heart pounded, then slowed, then pounded again. And then the flatline. The world disappeared. Cold snow. Silence. I was back. Same road. Same freezing air. Same figure waiting. Closer now. I could clearly see the shape of its face. Pale skin was stretched too tightly over long bones. Its eyes were sunk deep like shadows. "No," I whispered. "Stay away." Tilted its head again, almost confused, almost curious. His voice sounded like cracking ice. "You were warm, but now you are close." "No, I'm not going with you. You already did." A sudden jolt hit my chest like a lightning strike. The world cracked again, and I was back in the hospital, shaking, sweating, screaming. "It's okay," a nurse shouted, holding my arm. "You're back, Ron. You're back." But I flatlined 2 more times. Each time, the road, the cold, the figure closer, closer, closer. On the 4th time, it reached out, its chilling fingertips brushing my wrist. And then the defibrillator ripped me away again. When I was finally stable enough for surgery, the heart doctor inserted the stent and said I had survived something most men my age never walk away from. "You're lucky," he told me. But it didn't feel like luck. It felt like something had followed me back. Recovery was slow. I spent 3 days in the hospital bed, connected to beeping machines that sounded like they were counting down to something. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I heard footsteps crunching across the snow. Nurses said it was trauma. Doctors said it was just images left over from when my brain didn't have enough oxygen. But one night, around 2 a.m., I heard it clearly. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps in the hallway right outside my room. Soft, rhythmic, too slow to be a nurse walking. Then, something stopped right outside my door. I held my breath. The door handle clicked and turned. "No, please no," I whispered. But the door didn't open. Instead, a voice slipped through the tiny crack between the door and the frame. "You came back warm, but winter keeps what winter touches." I passed out. When I woke up, the nurses insisted no one had been in the hall, but the temperature in my room had dropped almost to freezing. When I finally returned home after 2 weeks of resting, Kendra tried hard to keep the house warm, cozy, and festive. The Christmas decorations were up. Pine candles were burning. A light snowfall covered the windows. She desperately wanted things to be normal. She wanted peace. But the thing that had touched me has never left. The first night home, I woke up gasping for air, my breath misting in the air. The window over my bed was covered in a thick layer of frost, even though it was locked and the glass was supposed to keep the cold out. And on the frost were fingerprints, long, thin, with too many joints, just like the hand I saw on the frozen road. I shook my wife awake. "Kendra, look!" She sat up, squinting. "It's just frost, babe." "No, look at the prints. They're probably ours or from the dog." "Our dog has paws, not fingers," I whispered, but she ignored me. After that night, the prints started appearing everywhere. On the hallway mirror, the shower glass, the car windshield. Each set of prints was closer and lower, as though whatever it was crouching, watching, waiting. The cold followed me everywhere, even in July, even in the shower. Once, while drying off, the bathroom light flickered, and in the mirror behind me, I saw a quick flash of a figure standing in the corner. It lasted only a second, maybe less, but it was the same tall shape. The winter thing, the death thing, the thing that waited for me on the frozen road. The next December, in 2006, I had mostly recovered physically, but mentally, I was a mess. I avoided the gym, avoided bikes, and avoided the snow. But Christmas Eve arrived anyway. Family came over. Kids laughed. Lights blinked. Music played softly. I really tried to pretend things were normal. But as I carried a tray of drinks into the living room, something cold touched my wrist. I dropped the glasses, and they shattered on the floor. Everyone jumped. "What happened?" Kendra asked. I stared at my wrist. There was a frostbite mark right where the figure had touched me on the road. A thin, pale white oval of skin. I whispered, "He's back." "Who?" she asked. "The thing that waited for me." People stared at me like I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But then our front door slowly creaked open, even though it was locked. A gust of freezing cold air swept into the house. All the candles went out at once. Every breath we took turned into fog. People panicked. "What the hell? Is the heat broken? Why is it so darn cold?" And then I heard it. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps inside the house, coming down the hallway. My nephew whispered, "Uncle Ron, someone's in here." I whispered back, "No, something's in here." A shape appeared in the doorway, Tall, bent, shifting like smoke trapped in ice. Its voice slid across the room. "You left the road too soon," Kendra screamed. The kids cried, but the thing looked only at me. Only ever at me. "You came back warm," it whispered. "But winter remembers." I backed away. "You can't have me. You were mine. You crossed the vein." I don't know what happened next. Maybe Kendra finally got the door shut, or maybe the fear simply broke the moment. All I know is that when the police arrived, called by a terrified neighbor, the house was freezing, but empty. We moved out of Maple Ridge 2 weeks later. I never saw the figure again, but every December, the temperature in my home drops sharply, and I check the windows for those long, terrible fingerprints. The doctors saved me from the heart attack, but they couldn't save me from the winter. I learned that death doesn't always take you right away. Sometimes it just touches you, reminds you that you are late, and promises to wait. And I am always waiting now, too, for the sound of snow crunching on a perfectly quiet road. I shook my head. "Leave me alone." The figure stepped closer, and with every step, the lights in the house grew dimmer. My chest felt tight again, the same crushing pressure, the same numbness in my left arm. "No!" I gasped. "Not again." My heart pounded, slowed, and then stopped working correctly. I felt myself falling, not physically, but slipping back into that frozen world. The snow, the road, the silence. But then Kendra grabbed me from behind, wrapping her arms tightly around my chest. "Ron, don't you dare go anywhere," she yelled. Her voice, her warmth, pulled me back. The figure hissed, a sound like ice breaking off a roof. "You will return when winter calls." And just like that, it was gone. The lights came back on. The heat returned. The sound of footsteps vanished. But the cold feeling in my chest remained. It's been almost 20 years now. I'm 64, and I'm as healthy as I can be. I still take my medicine, I'm still careful, and I'm still breathing. But I know the truth. Something followed me back from the edge of death. Something patient, something cold, something that truly believes my life still belongs to it. And every single Christmas Eve, just after midnight, I hear it outside my bedroom window. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Waiting for the winter connection, the vein, to open again. Waiting for me to fall asleep. Waiting for me to return to the road of frozen snowflakes where time doesn't move. Waiting to finish what it started. And one day, maybe tomorrow, maybe years from now, I know it will touch my wrist again. And this time, I don't think I'll wake up.